Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Widowhood. Our guest today, Jazzy, is a special guest for this podcast airing close to Mother's Day. You are going to learn a lot from this young lady. She is going to share the perspective from a child losing a parent and provide helpful tips that you long to hear. Let's get into this conversation now. Hey, Jazzy, welcome to the Widowhood.
Hi.
Hi. When you hear welcome to the Widowhood, if I could see the ticker tape going across your forehead, what were your first thoughts?
My first thoughts, originally, because I have before and then now, being more immersed into it. When I first heard about it, I thought widowhood was just for people who have lost spouses. And for a while there, I was like, I don't know if I fit into this. But after being a part of it more and being part of conversations, I think it's a really it's important for everyone in their grief because I haven't been married, I haven't lost a spouse, but everyone has someone, everyone has grieved someone or some, and to be able to talk about it with other people is a really cool experience because sometimes you don't have anyone to relate to that. And so it's a very big difference from when I first heard about it till now.
Thank you. That means it goes in line with what our intention was. I'm from Chicago, so hood to me means more like family and that connection. So when my husband passed and I became a widow, my children lost a parent. Their brothers lost a sibling. The nieces and nephew lost an uncle. So even though the widow or widower may be the focus of the conversation, everybody else is involved in that. And when we do come together and share our different versions of loss from that same person, I think it creates, I don't know, tell me what it creates for you when you hear different people talk about that.
Well, I think finding a community when you are grieving is super, super important because with grief itself, it's super easy to get caught in the super dark place and it's really hard to get yourself out of it. But if you have people who relate, even if it's not the exact same way as you, if you have people you can talk to and who can understand things in a different perspective than you, it can really be super eye-opening and also help you within yourself because you're hey, I don't feel so alone in this. I don't feel like I have to bottle it up so that I don't bug other people with it. Or at least that's how it is for me.
No, you make a common statement. How did you go from not being bottled up and feeling like you were bothering people to start talking about the person you love? And who is the person you love and what is their name?
So the person I love is my mom. Her name is Dawn. I never talked about my grief. It wasn't ever something that I thought I could talk about because the adults in my life were never able to be at a place where they could talk about it. We could say her name in passing. We could talk about certain things here or there, but the general topic of her and grief in general just was off the table completely. And it wasn't until I came on TikTok and I found other people that I connected to that I felt super comfortable around. And then in being in those lives, I got connected to you and I didn't realize how many people were currently grieving people they've lost. And while it's not in the same sense of oh, they lost a parent, most of the time, a lot of it was I finally have people that if I feel the need to say something because it's been bugging me, because it's been on my chest at the top of my head, I don't have to feel the need to shove it back down because now I have people I can talk to. I have people that, won't shut me down every single time I say, like, I feel sad or I don't know how to describe how I'm feeling. And it's a nice feeling to know, like, oh, I don't have to go to my journals every 2 seconds to talk about it. I can talk to other people.
Wow, you said a lot there, Jazz. How old were you when your mother, Dawn, left this world?
I was 8 going on 9 because she passed the month before my ninth birthday.
And how old are you now?
I am 21 now, so it's going on 13 years this year.
I have so much I want to ask you, but let me slow down a little bit.
Okay.
Going back to being able to connect in community, how has that impacted your grief?
It feels like a big weight has been lifted off of my shoulders, and the more that I'm, like, in these conversations and around people that I can talk about it with, it's like the weight, like, gets lighter and lighter because for the longest time, it was so heavy, and it was something that I desperately wanted to understand, to talk about it with other people, to, like, get a deeper understanding of it, but I never could. So having like a community of people to talk to about it with, I'm like, okay, I don't have to deal with this alone. Like, I may be, in some senses, feel super alone with it in my real life, but I know that when it comes to like support and love and community, there are people I can go to, which I never really had until I was like 19.
Hey, hold on. You say real life. Do you only connect with these people on social media? Or do you connect with them outside of social media? What does that mean?
When I say, like, real life, I'm talking about, like, people that I see on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
Like, there's no one in my immediate family with, like, my friends, maybe a couple, but other than that, it's not, like, something we truly decide to talk about just because it's so heavy for us individually that sometimes when you talk about it together, it feels even heavier. And when I say like real life, like most of these people I did meet online. And so if I'm going through it and like with the people in my real life, like physical life, I guess, I can get on my phone and I can message or call anyone. I can get on a live, and that's when I can like truly talk about things in a sense.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. A lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, but oftentimes people feel if I talk about it, I'm going to make it worse. If I talk about it, then it's going to be present. If I talk about it, I'm afraid that I'll never be able to pull myself up from my sadness. When you hear statements like that, what does that look like for you?
Well, that's how I thought for the longest time, that if I acknowledged it, if I talked about it, sometimes even I even thought about it, like it's there, it's not going away, I can't ignore it anymore, and it's gonna weigh me down. But after pushing it down for so long and refusing to talk about it, actually talking about it helped a lot because you're no longer bottling it up and you're allowing yourself to like feel your feelings and like figure out what those feelings are and how it's affecting you because your mental is very connected to your physical. So, like, if you're not taking care of yourself mentally, your physical is going to follow that and you're going to like suffer more like physical things because your mental is struggling and like vice versa. So like after bottling it up, talking about it helped a lot. And I get the fear of that, but also at the same time if you never face it and you never talk about it, then you're never going to be able to heal per se.
Hmm. Very wise words from she who is 21. You spoke earlier about journaling. Um, so when I think of someone your age, I think of more of a diary. But you use the term journal. Do those mean the same thing to you? And if not, how do they differ?
It used to mean the same thing when I like first started journaling because I was 8, 9, 10 years old. I didn't know like what journaling per se was. Everyone just had like these diaries that they wrote in. And so for a while, I thought journaling and diaries were the exact same thing. But now that I like journal a whole lot more than I used to, and it's become an everyday part of like my schedule, I guess you would say. For me, like a diary is like, oh, you'll put a little entry here or there and you'll talk about how you're feeling and maybe you'll reflect on it later. But journaling in itself it could mean literally anything. It could be a junk journal. It could be writing quotes down that like motivate you. It could be daily affirmations. Like journaling, there's so much that can go into it that like saying journaling and diaries are the same thing are like not. I don't know
Okay,
how to explain it.
no, but you talk about journaling like there's different options. Can
Oh
you
yeah.
expand more on that? And when you say journaling, like, can you show me like maybe one of your journals or what that looks like? Or you talked about journaling for a while.
Oh, you just made me so excited to talk about journaling. So I have a whole section of like my little bookshelf dedicated for my journals. And the way I do journaling, like I have a very different purpose for basically every single journal I have. So like this journal, I've had it since I want to say 8.
Okay.
It went with me for like dance trips. It was with me for everything. I don't write in it often. It's one that I use every so often. And it's just like things that I deem super, super important myself. So this was when I was trying parts of my high school experience, important parts of my college experience. And now it's like where I put my favorite grief poems, I guess you would say.
Okay.
And then I have other ones where certain ones are just daily affirmations, certain ones are just for quotes I found. I do have a junk journal. Can't figure out where that is at the moment.
What is a
And
junk journal? And that's probably it's in the junk drawer, I'm guessing, but I don't know. What's a junk journal?
so a junk journal is basically you take things from your like everyday life, say like a fortune from a fortune cookie or a receipt or a picture that you took at a fair or it could even be a napkin or a wrapper or something and you just like tape them to a page and it turns into kind of a collage and it's like a reflection of like that day or that week and it doesn't even have to be writing. It is literally just little mementos from the day or week or whatever to like reflect back on and say like, "Oh, I remember this day." And it's simultaneously like therapeutic, but also like really good to look back on to say like, "I didn't feel like writing this day, but I decided to do this." And that was my like alternative.
Wow. So you have just explained the journaling is just not one particular book that you're writing in. It can be across different books for different subjects and different events in life. In that you journaling since 8. If you were to guess how many journals you've used, how many would it be?
Well, there's 7 in a box right here that are
Okay.
used.
Can we see them? Because sometimes the aesthetics of the journal is also part of the process.
This is one of my poetry journals. It's completely filled. I keep it in here because it's one of my like more full ones, I guess you would say. This one's another filled poetry journal. And I learned later on how to like make it more organized. So I have a little cheat sheet at the
Like a
front.
table of contents right there. Okay.
Yeah. This one, I can honestly say this journal was from one of like the worst times I think I've ever had in my life.
Okay.
And I wrote in it a lot for like my mental back then, but it's one I keep, but I never open for like memory's
Okay.
sake. Like, I don't want to remember how I felt, but I'm glad that younger me or me at the time felt it was important to write it here.
Okay.
And then these ones are just like little journals that I filled up and I ran out of pages and this was supposed to be a travel journal. I don't know. I used it for another purpose. But if I were to say like how many I've completed since I was 8, I want to say well over 40, but a lot of them got lost or like
Okay.
they were thrown away or something when we were cleaning. But I want to say well over 40.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. If someone were to say, what does grief mean to you? How would you respond to that?
And because I'm a psych student, I have like the technical term, but then I also have like the emotional term and like for me, honestly, grief is the process of understanding like the love you have for the person that's gone is that you love them, but there's no place for that love to go because it's stuck within you because they're no longer physically here. And so, like, you go through the 5 stages of grief and you feel all the feelings and however that process looks for you. But at the end of the day, like, grief isn't a bad thing. It's just something everyone deals with in some form or fashion. And for a lot of people, that's with people that were important to them. And for me, that's my mom. And I'm forever going to grieve her. But at the end of the day, I know that my grief for her is just my love that I have for her that I can't physically tell her because she's no longer physically here.
Wow, thank you. Your mother, Dawn, leaving at such a young age, how has that formed your life or been a part of your daily experience that you feel like other people with parents are not experiencing?
For a lot of my childhood, I felt very left out of a lot of things. And it wasn't even like events or like physical things per se. It was just the emotional experiences a lot of people had. Because yeah, I lost my mom, but I also didn't have my dad. So it
Mm,
was like people were having these little shopping dates with their parents, or even comes to the holidays and they were with their family. But my family never really felt complete after she died. So it was kind of like, I want to experience these things, but I know I can never experience these things. And I think that also, like, when you're young and it's like your most informative years, it is such a big time in your life to like figure out your identity for yourself and figure out who you are. And if, say, you lose one of those key parental figures, finding your identity for yourself is extremely difficult because questions you're supposed to ask them, things they're supposed to know that they're supposed to help you with, they're not there anymore. And for me, I had to either run to someone else or figure it out on my own. So a lot of my most informative years was literally just trying to figure out who I am because I didn't have those like stepping stones to figure that out, if that
mm.
makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And how have you been navigating that? Because, I mean, you went into high school, TMI, started your menstrual, um, started dating, now 21. Your parents are not there. And if someone were to bump into you on the street, like, oh, she seems like she's a fine, healthy, well, developed girl, da 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 da. What are the things that people don't know about your struggle and how you've been trying to fill that gap?
Well, I think a big thing, especially since I turned 21, is like this overwhelming feeling of like, wow, there is a lot of things that I really don't know. And the one person I want to ask isn't here to help me with this. I know for prom specifically, that was a day I had looked forward to for forever, but I looked forward to it with my mom. And so going to prom and graduating, but not being able to experience that with her, I was like, this is supposed to be an amazing night. And by all means, it is an amazing night. But there is something missing here. And I know exactly what it is. But if I try to explain that to other people, they simply won't understand. So I feel like for a lot of the biggest milestones in my life, as exciting as they were, as big as they were, whatever feelings I was feeling, overall, there was like a feeling of emptiness at some point too, because the person I wanted to experience that with, the person I wanted to help guide me through that wasn't there for that.
Hmm. Thank you for expressing that. For the adults in your life that are not talking, what would you want them to share? And how would that change your life if they were more open to communicating about Dawn?
Since I didn't really get to know her when she was alive because it was such a complicated like experience, and my family's stayed complicated since then, but back then it was way more complicated
Okay.
and I wasn't exactly living with them, so I didn't really get to know her as well. And I think the biggest question I've like wanted to ask the adults in my life is like, what was she like growing up? What was she
Mm,
like going into her adult years? What was she like before things got bad? And what was she like what was your experience with her? What was your relationship with her? Were you close with her? Like what are things that you might know about her that I probably never will?
Right.
And, like, there's been some more conversations recently, because I know a while ago when we talked, there were no conversations whatsoever. Those were completely off the table. There's been some conversations recently, and I've gotten to know a little more, but it's only to what they're okay with talking about. So I'm always left with a lot of questions, but I'm still forever thankful for what pieces of information I do get told, because it's like I get to know a little piece of her that I didn't get to know before.
And how does it feel getting to know more pieces of Dawn?
Simultaneously, like, super great, because I love to know more about her. I love to get to know, like, the type of person she was and, like, how she affected the people around her. But also, it makes me really sad in the same breath, because I'm like, I never get to experience that. And I so wish I could. And I think a lot of my grief is just longing for the mom that I never got, that I never had, but I wish I did. And that
Mm.
kinda sums that up.
No, thank you. In being sad, is that something you've grown accustomed to? Do you still fight it off, or how do you deal with being sad?
It used to be a very overwhelming feeling 99% of the time, and it made it really difficult when I was already going through other things, because it felt like my grief overshadowed everything. And now it's like, there's some days where I'll have really bad days, and some of it is due to my grief, and I'm like, "Wow, today is a really bad grief day. Let's figure out what to do with this." Whereas most of the time, it really just hits me around the holidays and, like, really big, I don't know, like, events like Mother's Day or her anniversary or her birthday, which also falls into the holiday season. So, like, it used to be super, super overwhelming, and now I can kinda pinpoint when it's gonna happen, and I'm like, "Okay, maybe I can prepare myself just a little bit."
Wow, when you talk about the times and that it's happening in preparation, what does preparation look like for grieving? And how, and if I hear you correctly, it's that anticipatory grief, the idea getting close to something. For someone who has no concept of that, how would you explain that to them?
So, I know for me, and I in a lot of conversations, a lot of people have said they, like, understood and they, like, agreed with this, is that when it comes to, like, big events, especially that are related to the person that you are grieving, a lot of times it isn't the date itself that you're anticipating, it's the feeling that is gonna hit you. And for me, it more hits me the, like, weeks leading up to it, because the only thing that's going through my brain is, "Okay, this date's coming up. I know that I'm gonna feel like this, and it's gonna hit me really hard." But the more I, like, anticipate it, the more I think about it, the more I let it weigh on me. It almost feels like the less it hurts, and I don't even know the right word to say for that, but it almost feels like the day itself doesn't hurt as bad as the anticipating of the day, because all you're thinking about leading up to it is the feeling and what you're gonna do and how you're gonna deal with it and how it's affecting everyone else who also is dealing with this day. And, like, the less you think about it, which is really hard to not do, because when you overthink, it's hard to not overthink.
Right.
But if the more you think about it, the more it hurts. And
Mm.
that's how it feels leading up to those days, if that makes sense.
It does. And how is your grief expressed, or what does that look like outwardly? If I caught you with a secret camera that no one could see and you were having your most difficult grief moment, what would that look like for you, Jeff?
I learned very, very early into, like, the grieving process, and even before that, that I am very closed off when it comes to my grief. And just with a lot of my emotions, like, you'll probably be able to read it on my face, but chances are I will not verbalize it. And so I kind of deal with it internally more so than anything else. I'll turn to journaling, I'll turn to waiting until I'm alone to, like, let myself feel the feelings. And recently I've gotten better at that. to like being more open to speaking about it. But like if you were to catch me on a normal day where my grief is really heavy, chances are I am masking it as best I humanly can so that nobody else like catches on that it is as bad as a day as it is. So that like nobody else puts a wrench in their day to like see how I'm doing. I want them to continue what they're doing and I will deal with it, but just in the safety of like my own safe space. If
In that safety of that safe space, feeling the feelings, what does that look like?
I shut out the entire world. Like, I will not talk to anyone else. I'll put on a comfort show, a comfort movie. I'll dive into journaling or reading a book, and I will let myself be by myself so that any outward opinions, any outward, like, whatever they could be thinking, it's just me and whatever my brain wants to think at that moment, wherever it wants to go, I let it because I'd rather let myself feel it than try to put into words for another person when I don't even know how to do that for myself.
Mm, that is a lot. So if someone was with you,
Yeah.
being present is enough. Trying
Mhm.
to fix it and talk. Do you find people stumbling on how to support you?
Usually, when I know that like I'm already having a bad day, I will only like, and it sounds such a weird thing to really verbalize, but I only open up to like a very select few people when it does come to days like that. And the people I do, like my best friend or like certain people that I know I can call and they'll make the space to listen without like putting in their own opinions. Like
Mm,
there are certain people that know me well enough and know how I react to things that they'll sit there with me and they'll open the floor for me to say whatever I need to or to cry it out or be angry about it or whatever I'm feeling in that moment. And then when I finally feel like, okay, I got it out a little bit, then they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, we're good now. We're good now.
wow. Thank you for sharing that. So you are 21. I am 58 and 59 in a couple of days. Do you see a difference in my age group dealing with grief versus your own? And can you share about that?
I mean, even just growing up in my house, there is a very big gap in and of itself to my uncle who's in his 40s and then my grandparents who are in their 70s and 80s. And I've learned not only from in my own household, but also with other people I've met, like the way we were raised in expressing our feelings and like talking about things and the way things are talked about is so vastly different. So sometimes the way you approach a conversation has to be different depending on who you're talking to. Because, say, I talk to my grandma, I'm like, okay, I cannot start this conversation the way I would with one of my friends because that's just going to end not pretty. I have to approach it in a way that I know she's going to understand, like, hey, Jazzy wants to talk about this. And if I'm feeling up to it, I'll talk to her about it. Or say someone that I meet on TikTok and um maybe I don't know them as well, but I know that they are older than me. I will figure out a way to approach that in a way that I know is not only respectful, but also makes sense to where both of us are at mentally while also still being at very different places, if that makes sense.
Hmm. So, what drove you to the field of psychology?
It was I want to say either my junior or senior year of high school, and I needed another credit, and I couldn't figure out what I needed to do. I just needed another credit for the semester. And my counselor said, you should take a psychology class. And I said, okay, I'll see how it goes. And one psychology class was all it took for me to say, this is pretty cool. I think I like this. So then, senior year, I took another psychology class both semesters. And that was when my teacher had said, like, do you, I think you would be good, like, majoring in this in college. And I was like, yeah, I've been debating it because at the time I was torn between a sports medicine major and then psychology. And then I realized I didn't like math enough for the sports medicine major. So I ended with psychology because, like, not only is it something that intrigues me, but also, like, I can use my writing in the field and I can, it makes sense with how my brain works too. It
Mm,
helps me understand other people.
wow. You talked about the poetry and the writing. Do you have any plans for those?
I have been working up to writing a book for my poetry. I have so many at this point that I have to like categorize it into like what I would want each book to be about because I'm not going to stuff a bunch of like, oh, this is grief and what is going on here and like so many different themes. So I know for the first book I write, I want it to be based off of grief and like all the poems I've written about grief. And a lot of those do involve talking about my mom, but the more I've written, the more I've realized like I can take my own personal experiences and as well as what I've heard other people talk about. And instead of just making it specifically for me, I can make the writing experience more inclusive for everyone else to understand. And that's been super fun to like explore. So I'm definitely working on writing a poetry book and I have a bunch of ideas for that.
Thank you. And speaking of making your poetry, relatable to other people, I know that this podcast is airing very close to Mother's Day, but tell them about something that you're doing for Widowhood in June.
Okay, so Miss Tina asked me to write a poem for a butterfly releasing that's happening in June. And so I wrote it. I'm making tweaks to it, but I'm really, really excited that I was not only asked to write a poem for like an event, like an actual event, but also that I get to share my writing with other people that I know will be able to relate to it in some form or fashion because grief is so universal.
It is. And being close to Mother's Day, when your podcast will release, how does it feel having this conversation, knowing that it'll be released then?
It feels really good. I think that's part of why I was so quick to like say yes to doing it today. Because I mean, me and my best friend were just talking about the other day how her and her mom invited me to to do like go to a concert or something on Mother's Day because they knew I needed the distraction because of how south my brain goes on that day. So to know like people were already thinking of where my mental is going to be at on the day, but also being asked to have this conversation around the same time as like everything else I have going on in my brain because I have been stuck with finals and I've been in school brain for so long. It feels good to like get out of the school brain I have going on and to like talk about something real that's like important to me and like that I know will be important to other people.
Thank you. And speaking of other people, and I'm going to ask specifically to people that are younger without a parent and Mother's Day coming up and knowing that Father's Day is around the corner. What are some things that you found that were helpful for you if no one invited you to participate in something and you had to manage this on your own?
For the longest time, I dreaded Mother's Day. I dreaded Father's Day. I dreaded both of those days like no other because I knew I was going to feel alone and I was going to feel left out. And those were like going out to lunch or whatever plans other people had with their parents, I wasn't going to be able to experience. But a thing I realized, and it took a long time for me to realize is that while some people do get those experiences, even if they do have parents that are still actively alive and still here, they don't get those experiences with their parents either. So while they may not understand where you're at in grief itself, there are people out there that understand what it's like to go through these big events, to go through these holidays without a parent there, without having to like understand exactly what you're feeling. So
Mm.
while you may feel alone in it, you are far from alone. And even if is no one else your age that fully understands it, there are always people out there that understand it in some form or fashion, and you are not entirely alone in that.
And not being alone seems to be very important.
I was just gonna say, like, building a community, even if it's 3 or 4 people, is super important because when you're stuck grieving, it's so easy to get stuck in that rut of like feeling so alone. And the more you feel alone, the more likely you are to not reach out to other people because you don't think anyone's gonna understand or you don't think anyone's gonna care. But finding people who understand and who care and who want to be that support for you is super important because they help you out of that hole, but they also help you find other things that you want to experience in life and like other things that you might not have been open to before.
Mm, thank you. There are some people that may think, well, okay, it's been 13 years. Your mother's not here. You can simply find some other women to fill the space. What would you say to that type of mentality?
Well, and I've met people with that type of mentality. I got myself stuck in some not great situations with that mentality. And what I can honestly say is like, yes, no matter how much time has passed, that whatever that person is to you, that meaning, that love, that like respect is never going away. You can always find other people that you may relate to in that sense. You know, they may give you that same sense of comfort or that same sense of love or that same sense of safety. But at the end of the day, that person that you love can never be replaced. So thinking like that is kind of more destructive than anything else because thinking you can just replace someone because they passed away is like saying that this passion that you had for the longest time, this thing that you loved for the longest time, oh, I can just easily replace that because it's no longer here. Like that's not how that works. It's destructive more than anything else.
I would agree. Jazzy, thank you for saying yes to this conversation. Were there things that you wanted to talk about that I didn't cover? Because I know we didn't have like a list. It was going to be an open conversation.
I think, and I didn't get to speak on this when I was doing the live last time, but I know a big thing that I wanted to talk about today was like, yes, I have like the child's perspective, but also when it comes to like, because I'm friends with, obviously within the grief community, there's a lot of like parents who lost their spouse and they don't know how to like help their kids. And I
Mm,
kind of wanted to speak to that just a little
yes,
bit because
yes,
I do
please.
understand like the opposite side of that, I guess.
No, no, go right ahead. That's why I asked you because I wanted to make sure we covered different things. Thank you.
I know that like because obviously I'll never fully understand it the way everyone else does if you have lost a spouse. But what I can say is even though I know it's like you're stuck in your own grief and that is a big big loss on your end because you know you don't have your spouse anymore and you have to take care of your kids. I think a big thing is just listening to them and being open to having conversations even if in your grief itself, you may not feel ready for that. The longer you hold back from talking about it, the more detriment it does to the kids because then they feel like they can't open up to you or they can't talk about it
Mm,
or they aren't allowed to feel it. And I mean, there's some people I've met that like they've done a really, really good job with it where they're like, okay, I may not be in the best place mentally right now, but my kids need that, you know? And I'm not saying like anyone's done a bad job with it. Everyone grieves in their own ways, but I think the biggest thing is like listening to your kids and like allowing them to feel it however they feel it because as a family unit, like you're all experiencing a really big loss. And I feel like a lot of the time in grief, the child's grief kind of like goes to the back burner. And
mm,
that's exactly how I felt for the longest time. Like the adults were so wrapped up in whatever was going on in their heads, in their minds, that like whatever I wanted to talk about, whatever I wanted to feel, whatever I wanted to like understand better, I never got the opportunity to do that because they felt it wasn't as important because you're younger or you're not going to understand. So, like, holding that space for them is super important because if you don't, it like, it makes it very difficult for them understanding later on. It took me 2 years to understand that my mom was no longer here. That
Mm.
is how that went.
So being dismissive because the person is a child, they have a loss and
Yeah.
needing to find the language on how to support their loss, answer the questions, and give them the support that they need to.
And, like, obviously, when you are talking to a child in any conversation, you have to change your vocabulary and you have to change your tone and, like, how you're delivering it. I know a big thing that didn't help me was being told, "Oh, your mom's no longer here." Because I was like, "What does that mean? Like, no longer, like, in this house? Like, where is
Mm.
she?" Like, you have to, like, change your vocabulary and, like, your tone and how you're delivering it, but also making it clear, like, "Hey, this person that you love, that is, like, the center of your universe is no longer here." But explain that in a way that will make sense to them, I guess. I don't know how to
No,
explain it
no, you make a
exactly.
good point. I heard someone say, and there's a lot of different language behind it, but not to tell a child that they were sick and then they died because a child is going to get sick with a cold. They're going to get sick with, you know, just little things. So then they're going to think, if I get sick, then that means I'm going to die. That's going to equal. So it may require a lot of research to understand that your parent, and if you go, they're asleep forever, well, then I'm not going to want to go to sleep because that means that I'm not going to wake up. So being very gentle to find that language that this body has a beginning and an end. And when that body has ended its cycle here in this world, and then the soul is gone, to explain that to a child, depending on your faith, depending on your background, and all the other different cultural things in your particular household, to bring that down to a child's level is critical to their process living in life and going forward with the reality that we have a beginning and the end. That is an excellent point. I'm sorry I didn't think of that before. Thank you.
Well, and I think another big thing that I never experienced because every adult in my life, like, snatched it away from me as fast as humanly possible. Grief therapy, especially when you're really, really young and experiencing a loss, grief therapy is beyond important. And it's still to this day, I like get upset that I never got to have grief therapy when she passed because I feel like it would have helped my understanding with it and my accepting of the situation. I mean, I said it took me 2 years to understand that not only is she gone, but I never get to see her again,
Mm.
and it took even longer to, like, process, like, "Oh, like, what am I supposed to do now? Like, who's supposed to help me become the person that, like, I've wanted, like, growing up because she's no longer here?" Like, I still beat myself up for the fact that I didn't vouch for myself harder when I was a child to have grief therapy or even any of those like resources because it is so helpful and you see it all the time with a lot of people who are grieving. And I just think it's super important. Like, since they are a child, if they can't advocate for themselves, you advocate for them because that is a very big factor.
It is. Jazzy, if you were able, with everything you've learned and all the knowledge you have, to talk to Jazzy the day after your mom passed, what would you tell her?
Youchie. Um, I think because at the time I was so confused, but I was also really sad because I didn't have a grasp on anything going on. I just knew everyone around me is sad and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just here. I feel like I would want to tell her like it's gonna be okay and that you aren't gonna feel this lost or lonely or scared forever. You're gonna come to a time and a place where you understand, where you've accepted some part of it within yourself, and that you're going to grow from it as a person because you're going to have the understanding of what grief is and how it affects not only you, but also the people around you, and also like how it shaped who I am today. She hasn't experienced that yet, but she is going to, and that's super important to understand.
Oh, thank you. So, to a Yowzy, I've asked you a lot of questions. Do you have any questions of me?
Um, I feel like I always have a bunch of questions to ask you, but when I get asked, all the questions go poof.
Well, you can't say I didn't try.
You did. You did.
I'm going to say something to our listeners, and then I would like you to close out this conversation with any final words, anything you want to share, or anything like that. And also where people can reach you if they're trying to connect with someone that they feel like they can resonate with you. I want to thank you for being here. I know that we are coming close to Mother's Day, and that's why I asked Jazzy to have this conversation. You are not alone. We are on this journey with you. I am sorry for the person that you've lost, but I'm glad that you found us, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
So ways you can reach me are on my TikTok, which is Jazzy_Skylar13. And my socials are connected through there and all that. But I just wanted to tell everyone watching that I know grief is difficult. I know that losing someone can greatly affect every aspect of your life, but I just wanted to let you know that you're not alone, that you have a community of people around you, whether you know it or not. And if you ever need someone to talk to when you are struggling or in need and your grief is just too heavy to deal with yourself, there are people to reach out to, and you are not going to be stuck in that place forever.
Thank you so much. Hello, Widowhood. I want to say thank you for every podcast that you have listened to, every podcast you have shared, and the comments that you have made. I am so honored to be able to share and support you. I am inviting you to help celebrate my birthday. For the month of May, your celebration is the donation of $5 in the month of May, 5 and 5. See what we're doing there? Widowhood Real Talk with Tina is a nonprofit registered 501c3, and your donations help us continue the podcast. And you can do that by texting HOPE for Widowhood to 53555. $5. Every person that's listened to one podcast would donate $5. That would help us continue doing the great work and serving the bereaved. We do that by hosting mental health events. We have a Walk for Love. You help us support our memorial garden, our butterfly release ceremony, a celebration retreat at the end of the year for widows and widowers. You are helping us provide books for people that are newly bereaved, a grief support group, and so much more. Your donation helps us help others. Thank you so much for texting and donating $5 by texting HOPE for Widowhood to 53555. Thank you.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then, visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.